I returned home unannounced from a canceled business trip to Chicago and found my 6-year-old daughter fighting for her life in the intensive care unit. My husband David was sitting outside her glass room. He was not crying. He was not praying. He was casually scrolling through his phone and smiling at a text message. In that exact moment before he even saw me, I opened my banking app and locked every single joint account he had access to. 5 minutes later, his scream of absolute panic echoed from the hospital cafeteria. My name is Rachel, and I am 34 years old. I work as a senior financial auditor for a major corporate firm, which means my entire career is built on exposing liars. Before I continue this nightmare of a story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to use your professional skills to take down a toxic partner. Trust me, you will want to hear how I dismantled his entire life. I walked slowly down the sterile white hallway toward the cafeteria. David was standing by the vending machine, violently hitting the buttons and glaring at his declined credit card. He was 36 years old, wearing the expensive designer gym clothes that I paid for, looking perfectly rested and entirely out of place in a hospital ward. "David," I said coldly. He jumped, dropping his phone onto the linoleum floor. "Rachel, what are you doing here? You are supposed to be in Chicago until Friday." I stared at him, feeling my blood turn to ice. "Our daughter is hooked up to a ventilator in room 4, and your biggest concern is why I am home early. What happened to Lily?" He quickly picked up his phone, shoving it deep into his pocket before I could see the screen. He immediately put on his best devastated father face, the exact one he always used when my parents came to visit. "It was her peanut allergy, Rachel. The school called me. She must have eaten something from another kid at lunch. I rushed her straight here. It has been an absolute nightmare." I crossed my arms, refusing to break eye contact. "Really? A peanut allergy at school? David, I pay $30,000 a year for Lily to attend a strict, nut-free private academy. They do not even allow granola bars on the premises. Furthermore, it is Tuesday. I checked the school portal on my taxi ride over here. Lily was marked absent today." His jaw tightened and the grieving father mask began to slip. "You are interrogating me right now. Your daughter is practically dying, and you are acting like one of your cold-blooded corporate audits. This is exactly why our marriage is falling apart. You care more about facts and numbers than your own family. Do not dare turn this around on me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the passing nurses would not hear. "I work 80-hour weeks auditing corporate fraud so you can pretend to be a venture capitalist while actually playing golf all day. You insisted on being the stay-at-home parent because your last 3 businesses completely failed. Your one job today was to keep her safe. Where were you, David?" "I was working on a huge investment pitch," he hissed, glancing around nervously. "I was busy trying to build a future for us while you fly around the country playing the breadwinner. My card just got declined for a simple cup of coffee, Rachel. Did you forget to transfer the funds again? Unlock the account. I need to pay the hospital deposit right now." "I did not forget anything," I replied smoothly. I froze the accounts, all of them. The platinum checking the emergency savings, even the gas card. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted, no longer caring who heard him. "My daughter is in there. I need access to our money." "You do not need a single dime," I fired back, pulling my corporate insurance card from my wallet and pressing it flat against his chest. "My executive health plan covers 100% of medical expenses. There is no deposit. There is no copay. So tell me, David, what exactly do you need $500,000 of liquid cash for, right this second?" He swallowed hard, a thick bead of sweat forming on his forehead. Before he could formulate another pathetic lie, the heavy double doors of the intensive care unit swung open. Dr. Evans, the lead pediatric specialist, walked out with a grim expression on his face, holding a thick medical chart. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, "I need to speak with both of you immediately. It is about the toxicology report." Before the doctor could utter another word, the sharp clacking of designer heels echoed down the sterile corridor. I turned to see my mother-in-law, Patricia, and my sister-in-law, Naomi, storming toward us. They looked like they were dressed for a country club luncheon rather than a pediatric emergency. Patricia was wearing her signature pearl necklace and a crisp linen blazer, while Naomi had her phone in hand, looking utterly put out by the inconvenience of being here. "Oh, my poor boy," Patricia wailed, pushing right past me as if I were invisible. She wrapped her arms around David, who immediately leaned into her embrace like a frightened child. I came as fast as I could. The traffic on the interstate was just dreadful. "How are you holding up, darling?" I stood there in stunned silence. Her 6-year-old granddaughter was hooked up to machines just a few feet away, and Patricia was comforting a 36-year-old man who had not shed a single tear. Naomi stopped beside them, crossing her arms and glaring at me. "Well, Rachel," she sneered. "Nice of you to finally show up. We thought you would be too busy counting other people's money in Chicago to bother coming home." I felt a dangerous heat rising in my chest. "Naomi, this is not the time," I warned her, my voice low and steady. "Dr. Evans is trying to give us an update on Lily." "Oh, please," Patricia snapped, turning her harsh gaze toward me. "Do not act like the concerned mother now. If you were actually present in your own home instead of flying around the country playing corporate boss, this would never have happened. David has been doing everything. He is mother and father to that little girl. He sacrificed his own career to manage the household while you chase promotions." Sacrificed his career. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that bounced off the hospital walls. "Patricia, your son has not worked a paying job in 4 years. I pay the mortgage on the house he sleeps in. I pay the lease on the sports car he drove here today. And I fully fund the lifestyle that allows him to play golf 3 times a week. I even pay the landscaping company so he does not have to mow his own lawn. The only thing he was supposed to manage today was keeping our daughter safe, and he could not even do that." David finally spoke up, stepping out from behind his mother. "I am trying my best, Rachel. You make me feel completely useless in my own home. You criticize everything I do. I criticize you because you lie." "David," I shot back without missing a beat. "You told me you were at a business meeting this afternoon. Yet when I called the hospital, they said you arrived in gym clothes smelling like expensive cologne. What kind of business meeting happens at a fitness club while our daughter is supposedly at school?" Naomi jumped in, her voice shrill and defensive. "He has investor meetings at the club all the time. You are just trying to deflect the blame because you feel guilty. You feel guilty because you know deep down that Lily prefers him. He is the one who tucks her in at night while you are typing on your laptop." My hands balled into fists. The sheer audacity of these women was suffocating. I looked at Patricia, who was nodding along with her daughter. "Let me make something perfectly clear to both of you," I said, making sure my voice carried enough command to freeze them in place. "I am the one who handles the reality of this family. I am the one who tracks the budget, pays the taxes, and secures the future. And as of 20 minutes ago, I am also the one who locked down every single bank account associated with this man." Patricia's eyes widened in sheer horror. "You did what I locked the accounts," I repeated slowly, enjoying the sudden terror flashing across David's face. "So whatever game he is playing, whatever he needs $500,000 for today, the bank is permanently closed." "You vindictive monster," Patricia hissed, taking a threatening step toward me. "You cannot do that. You are financially abusing my son." Dr. Evans cleared his throat loudly, looking incredibly uncomfortable with the screaming match unfolding in his ward. "Excuse me," he said firmly, holding up the thick medical chart. "I need everyone to lower their voices immediately. This is an intensive care unit. If you cannot maintain composure, I will have security remove all of you from this floor." The threat of being thrown out finally silenced them. Patricia adjusted her blazer with a huff, while David looked at the floor, suddenly refusing to meet my angry gaze. "Thank you, Dr. Evans," said his tone professional but edged with irritation. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, as I was saying before, we were abruptly interrupted. We ran a full toxicology panel on Lily when she arrived. Her respiratory failure was severe, and we needed to understand exactly what caused such a violent reaction. David quickly stepped forward, putting his hands in his pockets, trying to sound confident. Like I told the triage nurses, it was a severe peanut allergy. She must have eaten a snack that another child brought to school. I watched the doctor closely. Dr. Evans did not nod. He did not look sympathetic. Instead, he flipped to the second page of his clipboard, his expression turning incredibly grave. Dr. Evans looked at David and then at me. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I need to speak with the two of you privately. He gestured toward a small consultation room down the hall. Patricia immediately scoffed. Whatever you have to say to them, you can say to me. I am her grandmother, and I have a right to know. Dr. Evans did not flinch. Hospital policy dictates that medical disclosures regarding a minor are strictly for the legal guardians. Please remain in the waiting area. Naomi grabbed her mother's arm. They both glared at me as if this was my fault. I followed the doctor into the small room. The heavy door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the chaotic noise of the intensive care unit. David walked in right after me, nervously rubbing his neck and avoiding my gaze. Dr. Evans sat down and folded his hands deliberately over the medical chart. Mr. Hayes, he began, his voice steady but carrying a sharp edge. You told the triage nurses that Lily was suffering from severe anaphylactic shock due to a peanut exposure. David nodded quickly, leaning forward to play the desperate father. Yes, exactly. Her throat was closing up. She could barely breathe when I found her. It was absolutely terrifying. I barely got her to the car in time. Dr. Evans stared right through his fabricated emotion. That is medically impossible, Mr. Hayes. We administered epinephrine as a standard emergency precaution upon her arrival, but her blood work shows absolutely no elevated histamine levels. There is zero evidence of an allergic reaction. Furthermore, her airway was not swollen or restricted in any way. Her respiratory system was severely depressed. I frowned, my analytical mind instantly latching on to the discrepancy. Depressed. What exactly does that mean? It means her central nervous system was forcibly shutting down, Dr. Evans replied grimly. We ran a comprehensive toxicology screen to find out exactly why her organs were failing. The results came back from the lab 10 minutes ago. Lily ingested a massive, potentially lethal dose of an adult prescription sleep aid. The silence became deafening. The horrifying words hung in the air like a physical weight pressing against my chest. Adult prescription sleep aid. I turned slowly to look at David. My professional instincts kicked in, reading his body language the same way I would read a fraudulent financial ledger. The color drained completely from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. His pupils dilated in sheer panic. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. My husband, the man who confidently screamed at me in the hallway about a peanut allergy, suddenly looked like a trapped rat. A sleep aid. I repeated, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. We do not keep sleeping pills in our house. I do not take them, and you claim to sleep perfectly fine. I am meticulous about keeping medications locked away. The specific compound we found is a heavy controlled sedative typically prescribed for severe chronic insomnia, Dr. Evans explained. Given your daughter's low body weight and young age, the amount she ingested was catastrophic. If you had brought her through those doors even 20 minutes later, she would have gone into full cardiac arrest. My stomach violently turned. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the linoleum floor. I walked over to David, invading his personal space, forcing him to look me in the eye. Where did she get those pills, David? I asked, keeping my tone deadly calm. He pressed his back hard into his chair, sweating profusely. I do not know, he stammered, his eyes darting frantically, looking for an escape. She must have found them somewhere. Maybe she picked something up off the street. Or maybe someone at the playground dropped them. Do not insult my intelligence, I snapped. You just told me she was at school. Then you told me you found her struggling to breathe at home. Which is it? Because the academy confirmed she was marked absent today. You kept her home. You had her all day. So how did a 6-year-old child ingest a lethal dose of adult sedatives while under your direct, undivided supervision? He held up his trembling hands defensively. You are twisting my words, Rachel. I panicked. I just assumed it was a peanut allergy because of her medical history. I was not thinking straight. I am a victim here too. Dr. Evans stood up, his expression hardening into pure steel. I do not care about your shifting narratives, he stated coldly. But as an attending physician, I am a mandatory reporter by state law. An unexplained near-fatal overdose of a minor involving heavy prescription narcotics requires immediate legal intervention. I contacted the authorities. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind Dr. Evans, David did not look at me. He practically sprinted out of the consultation room. I did not chase him. My only priority was Lily. I walked straight into the intensive care unit and stood by my daughter's bed. Seeing her tiny body hooked up to so many machines broke my heart, but it also hardened my resolve. I knew David was out in the waiting area plotting with Patricia. I just did not realize how low they were willing to stoop until 30 minutes later. I was holding Lily's hand when a woman in a sharp gray suit walked into the room. She carried a thick black binder and wore a badge on her lapel. Mrs. Hayes, she said. It was not a question. Her tone was strictly business and entirely devoid of warmth. My name is Brenda Higgins. I am an investigator with Child Protective Services. We received an emergency hotline call regarding the deliberate endangerment of your daughter. I stood up, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Thank God, I said, reaching out to shake her hand. Dr. Evans told me he was contacting the authorities. My husband was the only one home with her today, and he lied about a peanut allergy. You need to question him immediately. Brenda did not take my hand. Instead, she opened her binder and looked at me with open disgust. I have already spoken to your husband in the waiting room, Mrs. Hayes, and I am not here to investigate him. I am here to investigate you. I froze. Excuse me? According to the report we received, Brenda continued, her voice loud enough for the attending nurses to hear. You are a highly stressed corporate executive who works 80 hours a week and frequently travels out of state. The report states that you rely on heavy prescription sedatives to cope with your demanding lifestyle. And this morning, in your rush to catch a flight to Chicago, you carelessly left your unmarked pill bottle on the kitchen counter where your 6-year-old daughter could easily reach it. The sheer audacity of the lie hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the investigator, my mind racing. David and Patricia had not just called the authorities to get ahead of the medical report. They had orchestrated a targeted character assassination to frame me for my own daughter's overdose. That is an absolute fabrication, I said, keeping my voice remarkably level. I am a financial auditor. I do not take sedatives. I do not even drink coffee after noon. My husband is the one who was completely in charge of Lily today. Your husband is a devoted, stay-at-home father who has sacrificed everything to raise this child. Brenda shot back, reading from her notes, as if they were gospel truth. He was the one who found her unresponsive. He was the one who rushed her to the emergency room while you were out of town chasing a paycheck. He stated that you have been increasingly erratic, emotionally absent, and negligent regarding household safety. His mother corroborated his entire statement. Of course she did. I scoffed, feeling a cold fury radiating through my veins. Have you bothered to look at the timeline, Brenda? I have been in Chicago since Sunday evening. I flew back early today. If I left pills on the kitchen counter this morning, I would have to possess the ability to teleport. Furthermore, the school marked Lily absent today. David kept her home. He had sole custody of her for the last 48 hours. Brenda frowned slightly, thrown off by the geographical impossibility of their lie, but she quickly recovered her stern demeanor. Deflecting blame is common in these situations, Mrs. Hayes. The fact remains that a lethal narcotic was found in your child's system. We take maternal negligence extremely seriously. Until this investigation is concluded, you are strictly forbidden from taking Lily out of this hospital. If you attempt to remove her, I will have law enforcement place her in emergency state custody. Do I make myself clear? I looked at this woman, realizing that arguing with her right now was useless. David had played the system perfectly. He used the societal stereotype of the overworked cold corporate mother against the devoted struggling stay-at-home dad. He knew a tearful grandmother and a panicked father would win the initial sympathy of any social worker. You make yourself perfectly clear, I replied smoothly, crossing my arms. But I highly suggest you do a thorough background check on the man crying in your waiting room. Because when the actual truth comes out, you are going to feel very foolish for threatening the only parent who is actually trying to protect this child. Brenda snapped her binder shut and marched out of the room. I took a deep breath, staring at the empty doorway. David thought he had backed me into a corner. He thought threatening me with state authorities would make me crumble and submit. He forgot that my entire career revolves around dismantling false narratives and finding the paper trail of guilty men. I pulled out my phone. It was time to stop playing defense. I pulled up my banking application. My screen showed a massive red alert. Just minutes before I locked the account, someone had attempted to initiate a wire transfer of exactly $500,000 from our high-yield joint savings account to an unknown external routing number. The transfer was flagged and frozen only because of my sudden financial lockdown. I walked out of the intensive care unit and scanned the crowded waiting room. Patricia was sitting on a vinyl sofa, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue, while Naomi rubbed her back in a dramatic display of fake grief. David was nowhere to be seen. I bypassed them completely and headed toward the secluded back hallway near the service elevators. That was exactly where I found him. David was pacing furiously back and forth, holding his cell phone to his ear and speaking in a frantic, hushed whisper. "We have a problem," he hissed into the receiver. "She locked everything. The wire did not go through. I need you to stall them. Tell them the capital will be there by tomorrow morning. I just need to break her down first." He hung up the phone, running a trembling hand through his perfectly styled hair. When he turned around and saw me standing at the end of the hallway, he flinched like he had just been electrocuted. "Who were you calling, David?" I asked, stepping into the dim fluorescent light. "The school to tell them Lily is absent, or maybe the peanut factory to sue them for a fake allergy." His shock quickly morphed into aggressive desperation. He marched toward me, closing the distance until he was towering over me, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. "Unlock the savings account right now, Rachel," he demanded, his voice thick with barely suppressed rage. "This is not a game. The billing department just pulled me aside. They said they are bringing in out-of-network specialists for Lily. We need to put down an immediate massive cash retainer, or they are going to transfer her to a run-down state facility." I stared up at him, feeling absolutely nothing but cold contempt. "You are a terrible liar," I said softly. "I am not lying," he shouted, his face turning an angry shade of red. "Do you want your daughter to die in some underfunded county hospital because you are too cheap to unlock our money? Transfer the $500,000 to my personal checking account right now so I can pay the hospital escrow. If you do not do this, I swear I will tell the social worker that you are intentionally withholding medical care from your own child." He actually thought the threat of Child Protective Services would paralyze me. He thought I would panic and hand over everything I had worked for. Instead, I reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out my corporate platinum insurance card, and slapped it hard right against his chest. He reflexively brought his hands up to catch it before it fell to the floor. "Read the back of that card, David," I instructed, my tone razor sharp. "Go ahead. Read the gold print under the emergency contact number." He looked down at the plastic card, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. "Since you struggle with reading comprehension, let me summarize it for you." I continued, stepping even closer, so he was forced to back up against the concrete wall. "My corporate executive plan has 0 out-of-network restrictions for emergency critical care. It covers 100% of all specialists, all procedures, and all medications. There is no escrow. There is no cash retainer. And hospital billing departments do not demand $500,000 up front for an intensive care pediatric patient." His eyes darted frantically around the empty hallway. Rachel, you do not understand how these things work. I understand exactly how money works. I snapped, cutting him off completely. That is my actual job. So let us drop the grieving father routine and get down to the math. I saw the alert on my phone. You tried to wire $500,000 to an external offshore routing number at the exact same time our daughter was fighting for her life alone in our house. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing visibly, the color completely drained from his face for the second time today. What is the deadline, David? I asked, leaning in closer. Who was on the phone just now? What happens to you if that wire transfer does not clear by tomorrow morning? Are you in debt? Did you borrow money from the wrong people to fund your fake venture capital lifestyle? Did you mortgage our house behind my back? Shut up, he yelled, his voice cracking with pure panic. You do not know anything. You are just a paranoid, controlling workaholic. I know that you drugged our daughter to keep her quiet, I whispered, watching his eyes widen in sheer terror. I know that you needed her asleep so you could orchestrate this financial transaction without interruption. And I know that whatever you have done, it is bad enough that you are willing to destroy me to cover it up. David stared at me, his chest heaving as he realized his intimidation tactics had completely failed. He had no leverage left. Without another word, he shoved past me, practically running toward the stairwell to escape my interrogation. I let him run, completely unaware that someone else had been watching our entire exchange from the shadows. As the heavy fire door slammed shut behind David, leaving an echoing thud in the corridor, I leaned against the cold concrete wall and closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. I needed to gather my thoughts. I needed to prepare for whatever legal war was about to begin. That was when a tall figure stepped out from the recessed alcove near the abandoned service elevator. Rachel, a deep, steady voice said quietly. I opened my eyes and stood up straight. It was Jamal. He was Naomi's husband, my 35-year-old brother-in-law, and arguably the only person in this entirely toxic family who possessed a moral compass. Jamal was a brilliant software engineer for a major tech firm. He was an observant African-American man who usually kept to himself at family gatherings, quietly sipping his beer while Patricia and Naomi gossiped. Today, he was wearing a dark gray sweater and looking incredibly tense. Jamal, I said, keeping my guard up. How much of that did you hear? Enough to know that David is backed into a corner, he replied, looking over his shoulder to make sure the hallway was still empty, and enough to know that Patricia and Naomi are perfectly fine with watching you take the fall for something you did not do. Listen to me, we do not have much time. Naomi thinks I went down to the cafeteria to get her a green tea. Come in here. He grabbed the handle of the adjacent stairwell door and pulled it open, gesturing for me to step inside. I hesitated for a moment. After the ambush from the social worker and David's unhinged behavior, I was finding it hard to trust anyone connected to the Hayes family. But Jamal had always been decent to me. I stepped into the stairwell. Jamal let the heavy door click shut, plunging us into the dim, yellow glow of the emergency lights. He looked at me with a mixture of deep sympathy and profound disgust. I need to tell you something, Rachel, he said, keeping his voice to a low murmur. I have been sitting in that waiting room, listening to them spin this ridiculous story about you leaving pills on the counter. It makes me sick. I cannot sit by and let them frame you for what happened to Lily. I crossed my arms. So you know David is lying. I know for an absolute fact that he is lying, Jamal stated firmly. Rachel, David was not at your house when Lily overdosed. The air in my lungs vanished. What did you just say? He was not home. Jamal repeated, his expression grim. He was at my house. My mind struggled to process this information, but the school marked Lily absent. David kept her home today. If he was at your house, where was my 6-year-old daughter? Jamal shook his head, looking disgusted. She was at your house, Rachel. He left her there, alone. A wave of pure nausea washed over me. He left a 6-year-old child completely unattended in a 2-story house. Why? Why would he go to your house in the middle of the day? Because Naomi was working from home today, and David needed a private place to meet with someone, Jamal explained. I was working downstairs in my home office. David showed up around 11 o'clock this morning looking like a nervous wreck. He brought some woman with him. She was carrying a leather briefcase and looked like a lawyer or a real estate agent. They went straight into the dining room with Naomi. They were signing documents, thick stacks of paperwork. I pressed my hand against my forehead trying to piece the puzzle together. The wire transfer attempt, the desperate need for cash, the secret meeting at Naomi's house. It was all connected. But how do you know the exact timeline, Jamal? Jamal reached into the pocket of his sweater. As a software engineer, I take my home network security very seriously. I have high-definition cameras on my front porch, and my internal network logs every device that connects to it. David connected his phone to my Wi-Fi the moment he walked in. He was at my house for nearly 2 hours. He did not leave until 1:30 in the afternoon. The paramedics logged the emergency call at 1:45, I whispered, realizing the horrifying truth. He went home, found her unresponsive, and immediately called an ambulance. But he was gone for 2 hours. My baby was completely alone for 2 hours. Jamal pulled his hand out of his pocket and held it out to me. Resting in his palm was a small black USB drive. I pulled the video files from my doorbell camera, he said softly. It shows exactly what time David arrived with that woman, and exactly what time he sprinted out of my house in a panic. I also pulled my router logs. Whatever David was doing at your house this morning before he came to mine, he was careless. He tried to print something over my wireless network, but the document got stuck in the print spooler. I extracted the cache. The file is on this drive. I took the USB drive from him, my fingers trembling slightly. The cold metal felt like a weapon. Why are you giving this to me, Jamal? If Naomi finds out you betrayed her family, she will destroy you. Jamal offered a bitter, tired smile. I have been secretly consulting with a divorce attorney for 3 months, Rachel. I am taking my kids and leaving Naomi. This family is a poison. I am just making sure you have the antidote before I go. I gripped the flash drive tightly in my fist. Thank you, Jamal. Do not thank me yet, he warned, opening the stairwell door a crack. Take that drive, plug it into your laptop, and look at the print file. Once you see what David was actually signing today, you are going to want to burn his entire world to the ground. I watched Jamal slip back through the heavy stairwell door, then made my way down to the hospital cafeteria. The room was mostly empty, filled with the harsh hum of vending machines and the smell of stale coffee. I found a small table in the far corner facing the wall so no one could look over my shoulder. I pulled my work laptop from my tote bag, flipped it open, and inserted the black USB drive Jamal had given me. My hands were shaking, but my mind was completely clear. I am a senior financial auditor. Finding hidden truths in a pile of digital paperwork is exactly what I do for a living. I clicked on the extracted print cache file. It was a scanned PDF of a multi-page legal contract. At first glance, it looked like a standard commercial real estate lease, but the formatting was deliberately confusing. The clauses were structured to hide the true beneficiaries. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes scanning the text rapidly. The document was an operating agreement for a newly formed limited liability company called Apex Holdings. David was listed as the primary investor, pledging a capital injection of exactly $500,000. This was the exact amount he had desperately tried to wire out of our joint savings account just an hour ago. But who was he investing in? David always claimed his venture capital deals were highly confidential, involving elite tech startups. I opened a secure browser window and logged into my corporate database, which gave me direct access to state business registries. I typed in the registration number for Apex Holdings. Within seconds, the official state filing popped up on my screen. I scrolled down to the section listing the managing directors and registered agents. The names stared back at me in stark black text: Patricia Hayes and Naomi Hayes. I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my chest. There was no tech startup, There was no elite venture capital firm. My husband was taking the money I worked 80-hour weeks to earn and funneling it directly into a shell company run by his mother and his sister. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and started pulling our joint banking records from the past 3 years. I tracked every mysterious withdrawal, every unexplained expense, and every time David claimed a business deal had gone bad and lost capital. The numbers lined up perfectly. Over the course of 36 months, David had systematically siphoned nearly $200,000 from our accounts in small increments. He used fake invoices for consulting fees to justify the outgoing cash. That money went straight to Patricia and Naomi. I realized with sickening clarity that I had been unknowingly funding their luxurious country club lifestyle. Naomi did not have a successful online business. Patricia did not have a wealthy retirement fund. They were living entirely off my paycheck using David as their personal bagman. But the $500,000 wire transfer was different. That was not a slow drip of funds. That was a massive lump sum, a desperate grab for cash. Why did they need $500,000 today, of all days? I went back to the print file from Jamal and scrutinized the final pages of the document. Attached to the operating agreement was a commercial loan application. Naomi and Patricia had purchased a failing retail plaza, and they were massively underwater on the mortgage. The bank was threatening foreclosure by the end of the week. David was trying to steal my life savings to bail out his mother and sister. I sat back in the hard plastic cafeteria chair, letting the magnitude of the betrayal wash over me. My mother-in-law had just stood in the intensive care unit and called me a negligent mother, fully knowing her son was currently trying to steal $500,000 from me to pay her debts. Naomi had mocked my career, a career that was literally paying for the designer shoes on her feet. They were a family of parasites. But as I stared at the screen, my auditor instincts told me something was still missing. The math did not make complete sense. Even if David managed to steal the $500,000, it would only cover the immediate default on the retail plaza. They would still need millions to actually renovate the property. David was lazy, but he was greedy. He would not empty his own safety net unless he had a guaranteed massive payday coming from somewhere else. I minimized the registry and opened his personal email inbox. I typed the word approved into the search bar, filtering for financial institutions. What I found next made my blood run completely cold. There, sitting at the top of his inbox, was an automated confirmation email from a high-risk underwriter. The subject line read, "Policy Approval and Activation." I clicked on the message, my heart pounding against my ribs. There was a secure link to a PDF document attached to the email. I opened it and began to read the terms. It was a comprehensive life insurance policy, but my eyes immediately caught the section listing the insured party. It did not say David Hayes. It did not say Rachel Hayes. The name printed in stark black letters was Lily Hayes. I stared at the screen, refusing to believe what I was seeing. The coverage amount was staggering, $3 million. The policy was categorized under accidental death and severe medical negligence, specifically covering household accidents and prescription drug overdoses. The sole beneficiary listed on the document was David. The policy had been finalized, signed, and activated exactly 14 days ago. I sat in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the empty hospital cafeteria, feeling as though all the oxygen had been violently sucked out of the room. My mind, which was professionally trained to connect disparate financial data points, rapidly assembled the horrific puzzle. The pieces locked together with devastating clarity, revealing a picture so evil I could barely process it. Patricia and Naomi needed millions of dollars to save their failing retail plaza and fund the necessary commercial renovations. The $500,000 wire transfer David attempted to execute today was just a temporary stopgap measure. It was only meant to delay the immediate bank foreclosure. It was never their endgame. The ultimate endgame was this $3 million insurance payout. My hands began to shake violently as the true sequence of today's events played out in my head. David did not accidentally leave a bottle of heavy sleeping pills on the kitchen counter. Lily did not mistake them for candy. David needed to leave the house to meet the shady real estate lawyer at Naomi's place. He needed to forge my signature on commercial mortgage documents to leverage our $2 million home. But he could not take a 6-year-old child to an illegal meeting. And he could not leave her awake at home where she might call me, ask a neighbor for help, or wander outside. He needed her to be quiet. He needed her to be completely incapacitated. So he took an adult prescription sedative, crushed it up, and deliberately fed it to our little girl. He intentionally poisoned his own daughter. In his twisted, desperate mind, it was a calculated risk with no downside. If the heavy dose merely knocked her out for a few hours, he could sneak out, sign the fraudulent documents, and return before she woke up. But if the dose proved lethal, as it very nearly did, he would simply play the devastated, grieving father. He would claim it was a tragic household accident. Patricia and Naomi would back up his story, and then he would collect $3 million entirely tax-free. He was willing to sacrifice his own child to fund his mother's failed real estate venture. A single tear slid down my cheek, dropping onto the silver keyboard of my laptop. But it was not a tear of sorrow or heartbreak. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated rage. I wiped it away aggressively. I was done crying. David had crossed a line that transformed him from a pathetic, lying husband into a dangerous, sociopathic monster. And I was going to tear his entire life apart piece by piece. I needed the physical proof. Digital files and network logs were incredibly damaging, but I knew David had physically signed forged documents today at his sister's house. If he realized I had locked the bank accounts and was onto his scheme, his first instinct would be to destroy the paper trail. Where would he hide the forged mortgage contracts? He would not leave them with Naomi, and he would not keep them in his car. He would lock them in the one place he thought I could never access: the heavy biometric floor safe in his home office. I quickly downloaded every single document I had found. I saved the $3 million insurance policy, the shell company operating agreement, the commercial loan application, and the network logs to my secure corporate cloud server. I pulled the black USB drive from my laptop and shoved it deep into my blazer pocket. I slammed the laptop shut and packed it into my tote bag. I stood up from the cafeteria table, my posture rigid, and my focus absolute. David was likely still upstairs arguing with the hospital billing department or trying to find another way to access our money. I had a narrow window of opportunity. I had to get to our house before he did. I marched out of the hospital cafeteria, my mind shifting into a state of hyperfocus. I bypassed the main elevators, taking the back stairwell to the parking garage. My heels echoed sharply against the concrete. Every second counted. If David realized the accounts were fully locked and his electronic wire transfer had failed, his next logical step would be to secure the physical copies of his fraudulent mortgage documents. I reached my silver Porsche, threw my tote bag onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. The powerful roar of the motor was the only comforting sound I had heard all day. I pulled out of the parking garage and merged onto the interstate. The drive from the medical center to our neighborhood usually took 30 minutes. I was determined to make it in 15. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel tightly as I navigated through the heavy afternoon traffic. I thought about the massive $2 million house I was driving back to. I bought that property 4 years ago, entirely with my own bonuses. It was a sprawling modern estate with floor-to-ceiling windows and a meticulously landscaped yard. David had contributed absolutely nothing to the down payment, yet he was currently trying to leverage my hard-earned equity to bail out his mother. The deeper I drove into our affluent suburb, the more my anger solidified into a cold, calculated strategy. I knew exactly where David would hide something as explosive as forged real estate contracts. My home office was on the ground floor, secured with a heavy oak door. Inside that office, hidden beneath a Persian rug, was a biometric floor safe. I had installed it myself to protect sensitive client audit files. David knew about the safe, but he did not have the fingerprint access or the master passcode. If he had brought those documents home after his secret meeting at his sister house, he would have desperately tried to stash them inside. I pressed my foot harder on the gas pedal. The trees lining the wide suburban streets blurred past me. I was not just going home to secure the paperwork I needed to pack a bag for Lily. She needed her favorite stuffed bear, her softest pajamas, and the comfort of her own things when she finally woke up in that sterile hospital room. But mostly, I needed to make sure David did not destroy the physical evidence of his crimes. Digital logs were fantastic, but holding the actual forged signature in my hands would give me the absolute leverage I needed to put him in a federal prison. I turned the corner onto my street, an exclusive cul-de-sac lined with massive oak trees and manicured hedges. As my house came into view at the end of the block, my heart skipped a beat. A sleek black Mercedes sedan was reversing rapidly out of my long driveway. The tires screeched slightly against the expensive paver stones, indicating the driver was in a massive hurry. I slowed my Porsche down, narrowing my eyes to get a better look at the vehicle. It was not David Carr. He drove a luxury sports coupe that I leased for him. This was a corporate vehicle, the kind typically driven by high-priced attorneys or real estate brokers. As the black sedan sped past me, going the opposite direction, I caught a brief glimpse of the driver through the tinted glass. It was a woman with sharp features and dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. She was gripping the steering wheel, looking incredibly panicked. This had to be the shady lawyer Jamal mentioned, the woman who had facilitated the illegal mortgage signing at the house. Why was she at my house right now? Did David send her to retrieve the documents while he stayed at the hospital to play the grieving father? The realization hit me like a physical blow. If she had the paperwork, my entire plan could fall apart. But as I pulled my Porsche into the driveway, I noticed something that immediately changed my assessment of the situation. The heavy custom mahogany front door of my house was left wide open. Swaying slightly in the afternoon breeze, I parked my car directly behind where the Mercedes had been and killed the engine. The silence of the wealthy neighborhood was eerie. I stepped out of the vehicle, leaving my tote bag on the seat, but keeping my phone securely in my hand, I walked slowly up the stone pathway toward the open front door. There was no sign of forced entry on the exterior, which meant whoever was inside had a key or had been let in. I took a deep breath and prepared to face the disaster inside. I pushed the heavy mahogany door wide open and stepped into the foyer. The house was dead silent except for a rhythmic metallic smashing sound echoing from down the hall. The noise was coming directly from my home office. I walked silently across the hardwood floor, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs. As I reached the doorway of the office, I stopped and stared at the scene unfolding before me. The Persian rug had been violently thrown aside. Kneeling on the floor was David. His expensive designer shirt was soaked in sweat and he was gripping a heavy steel crowbar. He was aggressively smashing the reinforced titanium keypad of my biometric floor safe. He was panting heavily, swinging the metal bar down with desperate brute force. He did not even hear me walk in. I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms, watching him destroy the keypad. "You are wasting your energy, David," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "That safe has a dual locking mechanism. Even if you completely smash the scanner, the internal deadbolts permanently lock down." David froze. He dropped the crowbar and spun around his chest, heaving. His eyes were wild and bloodshot. He looked like a cornered animal realizing the trap had just snapped shut. "What are you doing here, Rachel?" he demanded, stepping away from the safe. "You are supposed to be at the hospital with Lily." "I could ask you the exact same thing," I replied, stepping into the room. "But I already know the answer. You rushed home to hide the forged commercial mortgage contracts. The ones you signed at Naomi House this morning. The ones that female lawyer just dropped off for you before speeding out of our driveway." His face contorted in a mixture of shock and pure rage. He realized his entire timeline had collapsed. The grieving father mask completely fell away, revealing the resentful, toxic man underneath. "You always think you are so smart," he spat, kicking the crowbar across the room. You always have to be 10 steps ahead. You just could not let me handle this, could you? You had to go digging around locking accounts and asking questions. You poisoned our 6-year-old daughter, David. I said, my voice trembling with a terrifying calm. You fed her a lethal dose of adult sedatives so you could sneak out and leverage my house to pay for your mother-failing retail plaza. Did you really expect me to just sit quietly in the waiting room while you executed a $3 million life insurance scam? He let out a harsh, bitter laugh that sounded completely unhinged. Your house, he mocked, gesturing wildly around the room. Your safe, your money, your cars. Do you have any idea what it is like living with you, Rachel? You walk around here like you own everything because you do. You treat me like one of your pathetic corporate employees. I am your husband, but you make me feel like a child asking for an allowance. I provide for you, I fired back. I gave you the freedom to pursue your dreams while I worked myself to the bone. I did not want your charity, he yelled, taking a massive step toward me. I wanted respect. But you do not respect a man who makes less money than you. You emasculate me every single day. You look at me with that same cold, analytical stare you use on your spreadsheets. My mother and Naomi were right about you. You are a cold-blooded machine. You care more about your career and your bank accounts than you ever cared about me. Do not bring your parasitic family into this, I warned him. They have been living off my paycheck for 3 years. And you are willing to kill your own child just to keep funding their delusions of grandeur. It was not supposed to go this far, he hissed, pacing back and forth across the office. The dose was just supposed to make her sleep heavily. I needed her quiet so I could meet the lawyer and secure the loan. It was a temporary bridge loan, Rachel. I was going to pay it back once the plaza became profitable. I was going to be the hero of my family. I was finally going to have something that was mine. Something you did not buy for me. You are a monster, I said, staring at him with absolute disgust. You are going to federal prison, and you will never see Lily again. David stopped pacing. His chaotic energy suddenly shifted into something much more dangerous and calculating. He looked at me with a cold, dead stare. He slowly bent down and picked up the heavy steel crowbar from the floor. He gripped it tightly in his right hand. You are right about one thing, Rachel, he said softly. I am not going to let you win this time. You are not going to ruin my life and take my daughter away from me. I still have the upper hand here. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me. The office felt incredibly small, and the heavy door was right behind me. I refused to back away. I stood my ground and looked directly into his eyes. My mind was calculating his every possible move. If he struck me, he would go straight to jail for domestic assault and completely ruin his precious victim narrative. He knew this perfectly well. He stopped just a few feet away from me and tossed the heavy steel crowbar onto the ruined Persian rug. The metal hit the floor with a loud, jarring clatter that echoed through the empty house. You think you have me cornered? He said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You think your little corporate accounting tricks are going to save you. But you are forgetting one crucial detail, Rachel. I am the one who called Child Protective Services. And Brenda Higgins, that social worker you insulted at the hospital, completely bought my story. She despises you. She sees an arrogant, unfeeling corporate mother who neglects her own family. I have her right in my pocket. I crossed my arms tight against my chest. You are delusional, David. You literally poisoned our daughter today. Do you honestly think any judge in this state will grant you custody when the truth comes out? They will when the police find your hidden stash of narcotics? David smiled. It was a sickening and victorious smile that made my stomach churn. You see, Rachel, while you were busy playing detective and locking bank accounts at the hospital, my mother came over here. She took the remaining sedatives and planted them deep inside your designer travel luggage, the exact bags you just brought back from Chicago. It looks exactly like you smuggled them home, got careless, and left them out where Lily could find them. The sheer evil of his coordinated plan was breathtaking. Patricia had intentionally framed me. They weaponized the legal system and the social services network against a working mother. They knew exactly how society judged women who prioritized their careers. Here is what is going to happen. David continued, stepping into my personal space and pointing a finger at my face. You are going to sign a full quitclaim deed transferring this entire house into my name. You are going to wire that $500,000 into my personal checking account by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And you are going to sign an uncontested divorce agreement giving me full primary physical and legal custody of Lily. I stared at him in silence. He took my silence as fear which only fueled his massive ego. If you fight me on this, I will call Brenda right now, he threatened. I will tell her you are mentally unstable and physically abusive. I will have the local police raid this house. They will find the pills hidden in your luggage, and they will arrest you for child endangerment. You will go to a federal women's prison, Rachel. Your elite career will be permanently destroyed. Your reputation will be in ruins. And I will still get the house, the money, and the kid. You cannot possibly get away with this, I said softly, playing the part of the defeated wife. I already have, David sneered. The paperwork is being finalized right now. My lawyer, the one you saw leaving, will serve you the divorce and asset transfer documents tonight. We are going to have a nice family dinner at that upscale restaurant downtown. You will show up, you will sign every single page, and you will walk away with absolutely nothing. If you refuse, I make the call to the police, and you lose your daughter forever. He turned around and walked past me, deliberately bumping his shoulder hard against mine as he exited the office. Pack a bag for Lily, he called out over his shoulder without looking back. Then pack your own things. You do not live here anymore. I stood alone in the ruined home office, listening to the front door slam shut. His luxury sports car started in the driveway and quickly sped off down the street. He thought he had completely destroyed me. He thought the planted pills were his ultimate trump card. But David was a lazy man who did not understand how digital forensics actually worked. I walked out of the office and headed straight up the stairs to the master bathroom. I put on a pair of latex cleaning gloves and unzipped my leather travel bag. Sure enough, tucked neatly inside my makeup case was a plastic bottle of heavy prescription sedatives. I did not panic. I did not cry. I simply took out my phone and recorded a continuous video of exactly where and how the pills were hidden. Then I placed the bottle into a plastic Ziploc bag to preserve Patricia's fingerprints. They thought they were playing chess, but they did not even know the rules of the game. I grabbed a small duffel bag and went to Lily's room to pack her favorite pajamas and her stuffed bear. It was time to execute the next phase of my plan. I grabbed the small duffel bag and walked out of the house. I threw Lily's belongings onto the passenger seat of my Porsche, right next to my heavy work tote. I sat behind the wheel but did not start the engine right away. My mind kept returning to the woman in the black Mercedes. A sleazy real estate lawyer does not just casually drive to a client's house in the middle of a massive fraud scheme, unless she has a deeply personal stake in the outcome. I needed to know exactly who she was. I pulled out my laptop and balanced it on the steering wheel. David had not worked a legitimate job in 4 years, but before he convinced himself he was a venture capitalist, he worked as a mid-level manager at a regional logistics firm. He was quietly let go for quote-unquote restructuring, but I always suspected there was more to the story. I opened my phone and dialed the number for his former employer. I specifically asked for the human resources director, a woman named Barbara, whom I had met at a few corporate holiday parties. Barbara picked up on the third ring. "Rachel Hayes?" she said, sounding surprised. "It has been a long time. How is David doing?" I kept my voice perfectly steady, projecting the friendly professional tone I used in my daily audits. "He is doing well, Barbara. Actually, I am calling because we are finalizing our yearly taxes and our accountant noticed a discrepancy. We are missing several of David's old corporate card expense reports from his final 6 months at your firm. Is there any way you could email me a copy of his ledger?" Barbara hesitated. "You know company policy, Rachel. Those records are sealed since his departure." I lowered my voice, adding a touch of conspiratorial urgency. "I completely understand, Barbara, but the IRS is threatening an audit on our joint return because of those missing corporate deductions. If I do not provide the ledger, they might start looking into the firm's reimbursement protocols as well. You know how aggressive federal tax agents can be when they spot irregularities. That subtle threat was all it took. Within 5 minutes, an encrypted spreadsheet arrived in my inbox. I opened the file and began cross-referencing his expenditures. My eyes scanned the rows of data looking for anomalies. It did not take long. During his last 4 months at the company, David had expensed an outrageous amount of money under the category of legal consulting. But the receipts did not match the business profile. There were recurring charges for high-end steakhouses, expensive champagne at hotel bars, and multiple afternoon room bookings at a luxury boutique hotel downtown. I highlighted the exact dates of the hotel bookings. Then I opened our personal banking records from the exact same time period. Every single time David expensed a hotel room on the corporate card, a corresponding cash withdrawal was made from our joint checking account the very next day. He was pulling cash to buy expensive gifts without leaving a digital trail on our family accounts. I went back to the ledger and looked at the vendor name listed next to the massive legal consulting charges. It was a boutique real estate law firm located in the financial district. I copied the firm's name and pasted it into a search engine. I clicked on the firm's website and navigated directly to the staff directory. I scrolled past the senior partners until I found the junior associates. And there she was. The exact same woman I had just seen speeding out of my driveway in the black Mercedes. Her name was Vanessa Thorne. Her bio boasted about her aggressive tactics in commercial real estate law, but her professional headshot told me everything I needed to know. She had the exact same sharp features and dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. I leaned back against the leather seat of my Porsche. The pieces clicked together with sickening precision. Vanessa was not just a shady lawyer hired to forge a few signatures. She was David's mistress. He had been sleeping with her since his days at the logistics firm, which was definitely the real reason he got fired. She was the woman he was trying to build a new life with using my money. That was why she was willing to risk her legal career and face federal charges to process a fraudulent commercial mortgage. She thought she was securing her own financial future with my husband. David truly believed he was a criminal mastermind. He thought he could poison our daughter, frame me for child endangerment, steal my house, and ride off into the sunset with his lawyer mistress. The sheer arrogance of his plan was almost laughable. He had absolutely no idea that he had just handed a senior financial auditor the exact paper trail needed to destroy both of their lives permanently. I smiled a cold, hard smile. I closed my laptop and started the engine. It was time to look into the rest of his family. I backed my Porsche out of the driveway and drove away from the house that David was trying to steal. I needed a secure location with reliable internet where David could not find me. I headed to a quiet 24-hour diner located on the edge of the financial district. The diner was mostly empty at this hour. I slid into a back booth, ordered a black coffee, and opened my laptop. I connected to my encrypted corporate virtual private network. It was time to completely dismantle my mother-in-law. David and his mistress Vanessa were only one half of this criminal equation. Patricia and Naomi were the catalyst for this entire nightmare. They were the ones who desperately needed millions of dollars to save their failing commercial real estate venture. I opened the folder containing the state registry documents for their shell company Apex Holdings. As a senior financial auditor, I know exactly where arrogant people hide their dirty money. They always think they are smarter than the system. They use complex corporate structures to obscure their theft, but they always leave a paper trail. Patricia was officially listed as the managing director of the shell company. Naomi was listed as the chief financial officer. That was their first massive mistake. By legally attaching their real names to the executive titles, they assumed full legal and fiduciary responsibility for every single dollar that moved through those corporate accounts. I logged into a secure federal tax database using my specialized corporate credentials. I pulled the last 3 years of tax returns filed by Apex Holdings. I spent the next hour dissecting every single line item. The numbers were an absolute masterclass in amateur corporate fraud. Patricia and Naomi had been reporting massive operating losses on their retail plaza to avoid paying any federal or state income taxes. But at the exact same time, their corporate ledgers showed sudden influxes of unexplained cash. This was the stolen money that David had been slowly siphoning from my joint banking accounts over the last 3 years. I needed to see exactly how they classified the stolen money on their official filings. I zoomed in on the Schedule C deductions and the capital gains declarations. Naomi had categorized David's illicit cash transfers as anonymous charitable grants and tax-exempt business development loans. It was completely illegal. You cannot claim personal stolen funds as tax-exempt business capital. That is the literal definition of money laundering and criminal tax evasion. I scrolled down to the very bottom of the federal tax return document. There it was, Patricia's elaborate flowing signature, electronically certified under penalty of perjury. Right next to it was Naomi's signature. Both of them had knowingly submitted fraudulent financial documents to the Internal Revenue Service. They signed their own names to a federal crime. But I needed something even stronger than standard tax evasion. I needed something that would trigger an immediate and devastating federal response. I pulled up the bank routing numbers they used to receive David's stolen money. I noticed something that made me smile a cold, hard smile. The transfers had crossed state lines. Because my primary corporate payroll account was based in New York, and their shell company bank was registered in a different state, the transactions were classified as interstate commerce. By using electronic banking systems to move embezzled money across state borders, Patricia and Naomi had automatically committed federal wire fraud. The punishment for federal wire fraud and criminal tax evasion combined is incredibly severe. We were talking about mandatory minimum sentences in a federal penitentiary. Patricia thought she was so clever standing in the hospital waiting room and mocking my career. She thought my dedication to my job made me an unfeeling and negligent mother. She did not realize that my job gave me the exact tools and the precise legal knowledge required to send her straight to prison. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it the Hayes Indictment. I started compiling everything I had found. I saved the forged tax returns, the bank routing numbers, the corporate registry listings, and the digital signature pages. I organized the files meticulously, building an airtight case, just like I would for a corporate audit tribunal. Then I drafted an anonymous whistleblower complaint addressed directly to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. I attached all the undeniable proof of their money laundering scheme. All I had to do was click the send button and their entire financial world would instantly collapse. Their bank accounts would be frozen by the federal government. Their commercial assets would be immediately seized. But I did not hit send just yet. I wanted to time the explosion perfectly. I wanted Patricia and Naomi to feel the absolute peak of victory right before I ripped the floor out from under them. I closed the email draft and saved it to my outbox. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated on the diner table. It was an encrypted text message from Jamal. He was ready to meet. The trap for Patricia and Naomi was fully set, but I still needed Jamal's final pieces of evidence to completely close the loop on David. I finished my coffee, packed up my laptop, and headed out to meet my only ally. I drove to a small coffee shop on the industrial side of the city. It was miles away from the manicured lawns of our neighborhood and completely off the radar for anyone in David's social circle. The sky outside had turned a bruised shade of purple as evening approached. I parked my Porsche in the alleyway and walked through the unmarked back door. Jamal was already sitting at a corner table in the shadows. He wore a baseball cap pulled low and nursed a cold black coffee. He looked incredibly exhausted, the kind of deep fatigue that comes from realizing your entire marriage was built on a lie. I slid into the booth across from him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver external hard drive, sliding it across the scratched wooden table. "I got everything we discussed," Jamal said, his voice low and raspy. "But I also found something else." Something much worse than just the forged mortgage documents at Naomi House. I looked at the silver drive. What else did you find, Jamal? He opened his laptop. David came to my house to meet that lawyer, Jamal explained. He was there for 2 hours signing paperwork with Naomi. But when he left at 1:30, he did not go straight home. David is an idiot. When I helped him set up the Bluetooth system in his luxury sports car last year, I synced his vehicle navigation system to my secure cloud server as a backup. He never bothered to change the password or disable the active digital tracking. Jamal clicked on a file named Vehicle Telemetry. A digital map appeared showing a red line tracing his exact route. Watch the timestamps carefully, Jamal instructed, pointing a pen at the bottom of the screen. He left my house at 1:30. But he did not drive back to your suburb. He drove straight into the financial district. He parked his car in the underground garage of a high-rise condominium complex at 1:45. He stayed there for exactly 2 full hours. He did not pull back into your driveway until almost 4 o'clock. I stared at the address of the high-rise condominium. I recognized the street name immediately. I had just seen it an hour ago when I pulled the background check on Vanessa Thorne. It was her personal residential address. The reality of what I was looking at made the air in my lungs burn. David did not just leave our 6-year-old daughter heavily sedated and completely alone to sign illegal financial documents. After he committed the fraud, he drove to his mistress' apartment. He spent 2 hours in bed with Vanessa celebrating his supposed victory while my baby was lying unconscious on the floor of our house, slowly suffocating from a lethal overdose. Jamal closed the laptop, his face hardening with disgust. He was with her, Rachel. He was sleeping with another woman while Lily was dying. I pulled the security camera footage from the lobby of that condominium. I hacked their insecure management portal. It is all on that silver drive. Crystal clear high-definition video of David walking into the elevator with his arm around that lawyer, laughing like he did not have a care in the world. I picked up the silver hard drive. It felt heavier than a brick. My hands were perfectly steady. I had passed the point of anger and entered a state of absolute freezing clarity. David's timeline was now completely destroyed. He told the hospital and the social worker that he was home all day. He claimed he was working in the home office and found Lily struggling to breathe. But I now held indisputable government-grade GPS data and time-stamped video evidence proving he abandoned a drugged child for nearly 5 hours to commit federal fraud and commit adultery. "This is the kill shot," I whispered, clutching the drive tightly. "This proves criminal negligence and child endangerment beyond a shadow of a doubt. The social worker will have to eat her own words. The police will have to arrest him on the spot." Jamal nodded slowly, finishing his cold coffee. "Naomi just texted me. They are planning to serve you the divorce papers tonight at the restaurant. They think they have you completely trapped. They think you are going to show up and surrender." I looked at Jamal, a dangerous smile spreading across my face. "I am going to show up, Jamal. I am going to walk right into their little celebration, but I am not going to surrender. I am going to burn their entire family to the ground. And I want you to be sitting right there at the table to watch it happen." Jamal nodded, a grim smile finally breaking through his exhausted expression. He agreed to meet me at the restaurant at 8 o'clock sharp. I left the coffee shop and drove straight back to the medical center. My mind was racing with the impending confrontation, but my priority was still Lily. I parked the Porsche and practically ran through the hospital lobby, taking the stairs 2 at a time to reach the intensive care unit. When I pushed through the heavy double doors of the ward, I saw Dr. Evans standing outside room 4. The moment he saw me, the stern professional mask he had worn all day softened into a genuine smile. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, stepping aside so I could look through the glass. "She is waking up. Her vitals have stabilized and her respiratory function is completely back to normal. The medication is finally cycling out of her system." Tears of sheer relief burned my eyes. I pushed past him and walked into the room. Lily was lying in the hospital bed, looking incredibly small among all the wires and monitors, but her eyes were open. They were heavy and confused. but she was looking right at me. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice dry and raspy. I rushed to her side and gently took her tiny hand in mine, kissing her knuckles over and over again. "I am right here, sweetheart," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady so I would not frighten her. "Mommy is right here. You are safe now. Everything is going to be perfectly fine." "My tummy hurts," she murmured, closing her eyes against the bright fluorescent lights. "Daddy gave me some bitter medicine because I was coughing. Then I fell asleep really hard." Her innocent words were like a physical dagger to my heart. She just confirmed the absolute worst. David had disguised the lethal sedatives as cough medicine to trick his own daughter. I stroked her hair, taking a deep breath to push the blinding rage down. "You do not have to worry about that anymore, Lily. I brought your favorite stuffed bear and your soft pajamas. We are going to get you out of here very soon." I stood there holding my daughter for 10 minutes, soaking in the absolute miracle that she had survived. But my peace was abruptly shattered by the sound of sharp footsteps entering the room. I turned around expecting to see a nurse or Dr. Evans coming to check her monitors. Instead, standing at the foot of my daughter's hospital bed, was Vanessa Thorne. She was wearing a tailored designer suit, her dark hair pulled tightly back, just as I had seen in her corporate headshot. She carried an expensive leather briefcase and looked around the intensive care unit with a look of utter disdain, completely ignoring the fragile 6-year-old child recovering in the bed. "Rachel Hayes," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with arrogant condescension. "I am Vanessa Thorne. I am the legal counsel representing your husband David. We need to handle this right now." I carefully placed Lily's hand back on the blanket and stepped away from the bed, placing myself directly between my daughter and my husband mistress. "How did you get past the nurse's station?" I asked coldly. "And what kind of lawyer walks into a pediatric intensive care unit to corner a mother?" "The kind who knows you are out of time," Vanessa replied smoothly, completely unbothered by my anger. She popped the latches on her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. She slapped them down hard on the rolling medical tray table. "These are emergency divorce filings. Attached is a quitclaim deed for your residential property and a full asset forfeiture agreement. David has also drafted a binding custody arrangement granting him primary physical custody of Lily." I looked down at the papers. My husband mistress was standing in my daughter's hospital room trying to force me to sign away my house, my money, and my child. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. "And why exactly would I sign any of this?" I asked, crossing my arms and playing the part of the cornered victim. "Because if you do not sign them immediately..." Vanessa smiled a predatory smile. "David is going to instruct the social worker to proceed with the child endangerment charges. He told me all about the pills the police will find in your luggage. You are facing serious federal prison time, Rachel. You are a wealthy corporate auditor. Do you really want to lose your license, your career, and your freedom over a messy divorce? Just sign the papers. Transfer the $500,000 as a settlement fee. Walk away quietly, and David will make the criminal investigation disappear." She handed me an expensive gold pen, expecting me to break down crying. She expected me to panic at the threat of losing my elite career. She thought I was just a desperate working mother who had been outsmarted by her brilliant legal mind. I looked at the gold pen. I looked at the smug expression on her face. And then I looked at the legal documents. "I am not signing these in a hospital room," I said softly, letting my shoulders drop slightly to simulate defeat. "My daughter needs rest. If you want these signatures, you and David can meet me in public." Vanessa narrowed her eyes, studying my face for any sign of a trap. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. Less than a minute later, the heavy hospital room door swung open again, and David walked in. He looked perfectly composed, his hair restyled, and his expensive shirt tucked in. He took one look at my slumped shoulders and the unsigned papers on the tray table, and a massive, arrogant smile spread across his face. "She wants to do this in public," Vanessa said, handing the documents back to him. "She refuses to sign them here." David chuckled, a low, patronizing sound that echoed off the sterile walls. He walked over to the bed and placed a hand on the railing, completely ignoring Lily, who had fallen back asleep from exhaustion. "Of course you do, Rachel," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You always care about appearances. You want to make a scene in public so you can play the victim one last time. Fine. We can do it your way. It actually works out perfectly for me." I kept my head bowed, letting my hair fall forward to hide the intense hatred in my eyes. "Where do you want to meet?" I asked, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. David exchanged a triumphant look with Vanessa. "Tonight at 8 o'clock, he announced proudly. "The Capitol Grill downtown. It is highly exclusive and very public. I already made a reservation for 5. My mother and Naomi are joining us to celebrate the approval of their new commercial real estate loan. It seems fitting that we finalize our divorce and asset transfer at the exact same time we celebrate my family moving up in the world." The sheer audacity of his plan was staggering. He was turning the destruction of our marriage and the theft of my life savings into a celebratory dinner party. He wanted an audience. He wanted Patricia and Naomi to sit there and watch me surrender my wealth to them. He wanted to humiliate me completely. They were so blinded by their own greed that they could not see the massive trap I was building right in front of them. "I will be there," I said softly, looking down at my hands. "Just make sure you call off the social worker. Do not let her file the police report about the pills your mother planted in my luggage." David laughed again, a cruel sound that made my skin crawl. "As long as you sign every single page and authorize the $500,000 wire transfer by the end of dinner, the police will never hear from me. You have my word. We just want what is fair, Rachel. We just want what we deserve." His word meant absolutely nothing, but I nodded anyway, playing my part perfectly. I let my shoulders sag even further, projecting total surrender. Vanessa snapped her briefcase shut. "Do not be late, Rachel," she warned, stepping closer to me. "We are not going to wait around all night. If you do not show up by 8:15, I will personally drive to the precinct and hand over the child endangerment affidavit. You will be in handcuffs before midnight." "I understand," I replied, not looking up from the floor. David leaned over the bed and planted a fake kiss on Lily's forehead. "Daddy will be back tomorrow, sweetheart," he whispered, even though she was completely asleep. He stood up straight, adjusted his expensive jacket, and walked out of the intensive care unit with his mistress right by his side. The moment the door clicked shut, the facade of the defeated woman instantly vanished from my face. I stood up straight and pulled my phone from my blazer pocket. I sent a single text message to Jamal. "They took the bait. The Capitol Grill at 8 o'clock, be ready." Jamal replied instantly. "I am already dressed. I have the drive." I looked down at Lily. Her breathing was steady, and the color was finally returning to her cheeks. She was safe now under the constant watch of the pediatric nurses, and Dr. Evans had assured me she would make a full recovery. I gently stroked her cheek, making a silent promise to her. The man who hurt her was going to lose everything tonight. I packed up my laptop and my files, making sure every piece of evidence was secure. The federal tax fraud documents, the forged shell company operating agreement, the GPS telemetry data, and the security camera footage were all safely backed up. I walked out of the hospital and drove back to the city. I needed to go home one last time to change my clothes. I was not going to show up to the most important dinner of my life looking like a defeated victim in wrinkled work clothes. I walked into the empty house and went straight to my closet. I chose a tailored emerald green dress and a pair of sharp black stilettos. I applied my makeup with absolute precision, hiding the dark circles of exhaustion under my eyes. I looked into the mirror and saw a woman ready for war. It was 7:30. I grabbed my leather briefcase containing the physical copies of their complete financial destruction. I walked out to my Porsche and started the engine. The drive to the restaurant felt like the calm before a massive storm. David thought he was hosting a victory party. He had no idea he had just organized his own execution. I pulled my Porsche up to the valet stand in front of the Capitol Grill exactly at 8 o'clock. The valet opened my door and I stepped out onto the pristine sidewalk. The evening air was crisp, but I did not feel the cold. My entire body was humming with adrenaline. I handed the attendant my keys and walked through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant. The interior was a display of old money and ridiculous opulence. Dark mahogany walls lined with expensive oil paintings warmly lit by crystal chandeliers. The low murmur of wealthy patrons discussing business deals filled the room alongside the clinking of fine silver against porcelain. I checked my coat at the front desk, holding firmly onto my heavy leather briefcase. The hostess led me through the crowded dining room toward a private alcove in the back. Even before I reached the table, I could hear them. A loud, obnoxious burst of laughter echoed over the smooth jazz playing in the background. I stopped a few feet away, completely hidden by a large decorative indoor plant, and observed my targets. They were seated at a large round table covered in a crisp white linen cloth. Two silver buckets, chilling expensive bottles of champagne, sat right in the middle. David was sitting at the head of the table wearing a smug expression of absolute victory. Next to him was his mistress Vanessa, looking incredibly proud of herself in her sharp legal suit. Across from them sat Patricia and Naomi. My mother-in-law was wearing a brand new diamond necklace that I had definitely paid for, while Naomi was holding up her crystal flute, proposing a toast. To new beginnings, Naomi announced, her voice carrying a sickeningly sweet tone. And to finally getting rid of the dead weight holding this family back. They all clanked their glasses together and drank. They were celebrating the money they were about to steal from me. They were toasting to the destruction of my life, while my 6-year-old daughter was lying in a hospital bed recovering from poison. I gripped the handle of my briefcase so tightly my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, smoothed the front of my emerald green dress, and stepped out from behind the plant. "Good evening," I said, my voice perfectly calm and devoid of any emotion. The laughter at the table died instantly. 4 heads snapped in my direction. For a split second I saw a flash of genuine surprise in David's eyes. He probably expected me to show up in sweatpants looking like a shattered, weeping mess. Instead, I stood tall in a tailored designer dress looking completely put together. But his arrogance quickly overtook his surprise. He leaned back in his leather chair and gestured lazily to the empty seat directly across from him. "Rachel," he smirked. "Right on time. Have a seat." We went ahead and ordered the vintage champagne. I hope you do not mind footing the bill one last time. It is a celebratory occasion after all. I walked over to the empty chair and sat down. I did not place my briefcase on the floor. I kept it resting heavily on my lap, keeping my hands folded neatly on top of it. Patricia looked at me and let out a dramatic sigh of disapproval. "You could have at least worn something more subdued," Patricia criticized, taking a small sip of her drink. "This is a formal legal proceeding, Rachel, not a cocktail party. But I suppose you always did crave the center of attention." Naomi chimed in right on cue. "Honestly, I am just glad she actually showed up. I told David she might try to run away to avoid the child endangerment charges. You know how cowardly corporate types can be when the police get involved? I let their insults wash over me like water off a rock. I did not react. I did not defend myself. My silence only made them bolder. They mistook my calm demeanor for absolute submission." Vanessa leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. She slid a thick leather-bound folder across the white tablecloth, stopping it right in front of me. She placed a gold fountain pen carefully on top of the documents. "Let us skip the pleasantries," Vanessa said briskly. "You know exactly why you are here, Rachel. Inside this folder are the divorce papers, the custody agreement, and the quitclaim deed for the house. We have also included the wire transfer authorization for the $500,000. The routing numbers are already filled out. All you need to do is sign the bottom of each page and initialize the margins. Once the bank confirms the transfer tomorrow morning, David will officially drop the social services complaint." David smiled, leaning over to put his hand over Vanessa's hand. A public display of affection right in front of his wife. "See, Rachel," he said softly. "We are being completely reasonable. You get to walk away without a criminal record, and I get the financial compensation I deserve for enduring this marriage. Everyone wins." I looked down at the leather folder. I slowly reached out and picked up the gold fountain pen. Patricia and Naomi leaned forward in their seats, their eyes practically glowing with unadulterated greed. They were waiting for the signature that would save their failing real estate empire. "I am ready to sign," I said softly. "But we have to wait a few more minutes. We are missing one person." David frowned, looking confused. "Missing someone? Who else is coming?" Right on cue, a tall figure stepped out from the main dining room and walked straight toward our table. It was Jamal. He pulled up a spare chair and sat down right next to me, staring directly at his wife. The dinner trap was officially set. Naomi stared at her husband in confusion. "Jamal, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice carrying a sharp edge of irritation. "You are supposed to be at home watching the kids." Jamal did not blink. He kept his eyes locked firmly on Naomi. "I secured a babysitter," he replied, his voice completely flat. "I told you I had to run an errand. I figured I would stop by and see how this little family celebration was going. I would not miss this dinner for the world." David rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed by the interruption, but too arrogant to care. Whatever, he sighed, waving his hand dismissively. "The more the merrier, I suppose. Just sit there quietly, Jamal, and watch how real business is handled." Naomi let out a dramatic laugh, leaning back in her chair and taking another sip of her expensive champagne. "Actually, Jamal being here is perfect," she said, a wicked smile spreading across her face. "He gets to watch the great Rachel Hayes finally get knocked off her pedestal. You know, Rachel, I really have to thank you. Your relentless need to work 80-hour weeks was the best thing that ever happened to this family." I kept my hands folded over my leather briefcase. "Is that so?" I asked softly, encouraging her to keep talking. "Oh, absolutely," Naomi beamed. "While you were busy flying around the country doing whatever boring corporate audits you do, David was making sure your bank accounts were being put to good use. Do you have any idea how much of your money funded my lifestyle over the last 3 years? The designer clothes, the country club memberships, the luxury vacations. You paid for all of it. You were my personal ATM, and you were too arrogant to even notice." Patricia nodded in agreement, her new diamond necklace catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. "She was always too wrapped up in her own self-importance," Patricia sneered. "A real mother, a real wife would have noticed the signs." "But you only care about yourself, Rachel. That is why David had to find a real woman to build a future with." Patricia gestured toward Vanessa, who offered a sickeningly modest smile. "Vanessa understands what it takes to support a man," Patricia continued. "She is sharp and dedicated. Not to mention, she actually secured the commercial loan we needed for our real estate venture. With the $500,000 you are transferring to us tonight, we are going to renovate the entire retail plaza. We are going to be wealthy in our own right while you lose absolutely everything." Patricia suddenly pointed a manicured finger at my emerald green dress. "And speaking of losing things, you can leave the keys to your silver Porsche on the table before you go." I tilted my head slightly. "You want my car? You will not be able to afford the insurance premiums once the divorce goes through and the criminal charges are filed," Patricia stated matter-of-factly. "Besides, Naomi needs a reliable vehicle for her new role as a commercial property manager. Consider it a parting gift to the family that tolerated you for so long. Hand over the keys, Rachel. You will be taking the bus to your court hearings anyway." David burst into laughter, slamming his hand on the table. "God, I love this family," he wheezed, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. He leaned across the table, looking directly at me with a gaze full of pure malice. "Do you see now, Rachel? Do you see how completely outmatched you are? You tried to control me with your money, but I took it right out from under you. And the best part is that I am going to keep the house. Vanessa and I are going to redesign the master bedroom. We might even keep Lily around on the weekends just to remind her who her real parents are." The mention of my daughter name coming from the mouth of the man who poisoned her made the blood in my veins run cold. Jamal shifted in his seat, his jaw clenching so hard I could hear his teeth grind. I reached under the table and placed a steadying hand on his knee, reminding him to stay calm. The trap was almost ready to spring. I looked at the four of them. They were practically glowing with hubris. They had confessed to financial theft, emotional manipulation, and adultery right out in the open. They truly believed they were untouchable. They believed the fake child endangerment threat gave them absolute power over my entire existence. "Are you quite finished?" I asked, my voice steady and unnervingly quiet. Vanessa tapped the gold fountain pen against the thick leather folder. "We are finished talking," Rachel the mistress said sharply. "We have laid out the terms. You have heard the consequences. There is nothing left for you to say. Pick up the pen, sign the divorce papers, authorize the wire transfer, and hand over the keys to the Porsche. Do it now before I call the precinct and have you arrested right here in the middle of the restaurant." I looked at the gold pen. I looked at Vanessa. Then I slowly reached down and unlatched the heavy brass locks of my leather briefcase. It was time to show them what a real audit looked like. The heavy brass locks of my briefcase clicked open with a sharp metallic snap that seemed to cut right through the smooth jazz playing overhead. I picked up the gold fountain pen Vanessa had so graciously provided. I twirled it between my fingers for a second, feeling its weight. David leaned forward, a greedy smile stretching across his face, fully expecting me to press the nib to the divorce papers. Instead, I bypassed his documents entirely. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick red dossier, dropping it onto the white tablecloth with a heavy thud. I pushed the leather folder containing my surrender to the side and slid the red dossier directly into the center of the table. Vanessa frowned, her lawyer instincts instantly flaring up. "What is this, Rachel?" she asked, her voice losing its previously smug tone. I did not look at her. I turned my gaze directly to my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law. "This is a comprehensive financial audit," I announced calmly. "Specifically, it is a line-by-line forensic breakdown of a limited liability company registered under the name Apex Holdings." Patricia froze, holding her champagne flute halfway to her mouth. Naomi blinked rapidly, her eyes darting toward David in sudden panic. David just looked confused, clearly unaware of the actual corporate name his mother and sister used to hide their activities. He only cared about pulling cash to fund his own pathetic illusions. "You see, David," I continued, keeping my voice perfectly level, "while you were playing venture capitalist and stealing money from our joint savings accounts, your mother and sister were playing corporate executives. Patricia is listed as the managing director, and Naomi is the chief financial officer of Apex Holdings." "What are you talking about?" David demanded, looking back and forth between us. Rachel signed the papers and stopped playing games. I ignored him completely. I opened the red dossier and flipped to the first tab. "Let us talk about federal tax evasion," I said, looking right at Naomi. "Over the last 3 years, Apex Holdings has reported massive operational losses on a failing commercial retail plaza. But strangely enough, your corporate bank accounts show hundreds of thousands of dollars in unexplained cash deposits, money that exactly matches the amounts missing from my personal accounts. Every single illicit transfer was meticulously documented." Naomi swallowed hard, her face draining of color. "That is none of your business," she stammered, her previous confidence entirely gone. "We secured private investments. That is business capital." I smiled a cold, razor-sharp smile. "You categorized stolen money as anonymous charitable grants and tax-exempt business loans," I corrected her. "You used my stolen salary to fund your country club memberships and buy that shiny new diamond necklace Patricia is currently wearing. But you forgot one crucial detail. When you attach your real names to fraudulent federal tax returns, you commit perjury." Patricia slammed her glass down on the table, spilling champagne over the pristine white linen. "You are bluffing," Patricia hissed, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. "You do not have access to our corporate filings. You are just a bitter woman making up desperate lies to save your precious bank accounts." I reached into the dossier and pulled out the signature pages of their federal returns, laying them flat on the table. "I am a senior financial auditor, Patricia," I reminded her smoothly. Finding hidden money is what I do for a living. And I found absolutely everything. I found the bank routing numbers. I found the forged capital gains declarations. And I found the electronic signatures proving that both of you knowingly committed federal wire fraud by moving embezzled funds across state lines. The table descended into an absolute suffocating silence. Even Vanessa looked shocked, suddenly realizing her new boyfriend was tied to a massive federal money laundering operation. Jamal sat quietly next to me, taking a slow sip of water, watching his wife realize her entire life was over. He knew every word I spoke was the absolute truth. "You cannot prove any of this," Naomi whispered, her voice shaking violently. "We will hire lawyers. We will sue you for defamation." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, looking Naomi dead in the eye. "You will not have the money to hire a lawyer, Naomi," I said softly, "because I already submitted this entire dossier to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service this morning. The whistleblower complaint is active and fully verified by my corporate credentials, and federal agents do not care about your country club status when they come to collect stolen taxes. They will strip you of absolutely everything you own." Patricia stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, right on cue, she grabbed the left side of her chest. She let out a loud, dramatic gasp and slumped back against the heavy leather booth. "I cannot breathe," Patricia wheezed, her eyes fluttering shut. My heart. "Call an ambulance, David. The stress of these lies is giving me a heart attack." David jumped up from his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Look what you're doing, Rachel," he shouted, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You are literally killing my mother with your insane corporate conspiracy theories." I did not even blink. I reached for my glass of ice water and took a slow, deliberate sip. "Sit down, David," I commanded, my voice slicing right through his fake outrage. "She is not having a heart attack. Her skin color is perfectly normal. She is not sweating, and she is breathing evenly between her theatrical gasps. Furthermore, I happen to know she just passed her annual cardiology workup with flying colors last month because I paid the $4,000 out-of-network medical bill." Patricia cracked one eye open, realizing her dramatic performance was completely failing to stop the audit. "Stop playing the victim, Patricia," I said, leaning forward again. "Because the reality of your situation is about to get much worse, and you need to be fully conscious to understand it. You see, federal financial crimes are not handled like local misdemeanors. When a verified corporate auditor submits a heavily documented whistleblower complaint involving interstate wire fraud, the Internal Revenue Service does not wait around to schedule a polite interview. They act immediately to secure the stolen assets." Naomi scoffed nervously, trying to regain some of her previous arrogant posture. "You are completely bluffing. The government does not work that fast. You just submitted this supposed complaint this morning." I smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. "Why do you not check your phone, Naomi?" I suggested, gesturing toward her expensive designer handbag. "Open your mobile banking application right now. Go ahead. Let us see how much business capital you actually have left." Naomi hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she reached into her bag. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. The table was completely silent except for the faint sound of the restaurant jazz music. She opened the banking app. I watched her face. First came confusion. Then her eyes widened in absolute sheer terror. The color drained from her cheeks so fast she looked like a ghost. She started tapping the screen frantically, her perfectly manicured nails clicking loudly against the glass. "No," she whispered. "No, this cannot be right. It says 0. Everything says 0. The checking account, the savings account, the corporate line of credit. It is all locked. There is a red banner saying contact the Federal Fraud Department immediately." Patricia abruptly stopped faking her heart attack. She sat straight up and grabbed Naomi by the arm. "What do you mean it is locked?" Patricia demanded, her voice shrill and panicked. "Refresh the page, Naomi. Check the business escrow account." I already checked the escrow account, Rachel, I said, answering for her. The Internal Revenue Service froze all liquid assets associated with Apex Holdings at 4:00 this afternoon. By tomorrow morning, federal agents will place a permanent government lien on your failing retail plaza. You do not own that property anymore, Patricia. The government owns it. And because you used the plaza as collateral for other personal debts, your house and your car are next on the seizure list. Naomi dropped her phone onto the white tablecloth. It landed with a dull thud right next to the thick red audit dossier. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob uncontrollably. Real tears this time. The kind of tears that only come when a person realizes their entire privileged existence has just been permanently erased. Patricia looked at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You ruined us!" she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. "You planned this all along to destroy our family. You destroyed yourselves, Patricia." I replied, my tone completely devoid of pity. "You stole from me for 3 years. You funded your pathetic illusions of wealth with my hard work, and now you are going to pay the ultimate price. You are looking at a minimum of 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary for criminal tax evasion and wire fraud. Enjoy your new diamond necklace tonight, Patricia. It is the last nice thing you will ever wear before they put you in an orange jumpsuit." David took a massive step back from the table. His eyes were darting frantically between his sobbing sister, his terrified mother, and me. He was watching his entire support system completely collapse in real time. He looked at Vanessa, his mistress, seeking some kind of legal protection or reassurance from her. But Vanessa was staring at the red dossier, looking incredibly pale. She realized that as their legal counsel, she was dangerously close to becoming an accessory to a massive federal crime. "This has nothing to do with me," David stammered loudly, ensuring Vanessa heard him. "I did not sign those tax returns. I am not an executive at Apex Holdings. I just gave them the money. I did not know they were committing federal tax fraud." Naomi snapped her head up, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. "You threw us under the bus, you absolute coward!" she screamed at her brother, ignoring the shocked stares from the other tables in the restaurant. "You are the one who stole the cash from her accounts. You are the one who orchestrated the whole thing so you could play the big shot investor." I watched them turn on each other like starving animals trapped in a cage. The unbreakable family loyalty they always bragged about evaporated the second the threat of federal prison was introduced. But David truly thought he was safe. He thought he could sacrifice his mother and his sister to the federal government just to save his own skin. He had absolutely no idea that his own personal destruction was next on the menu. I turned my attention away from the sobbing mess of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I looked directly at the woman sitting next to my husband. Vanessa Thorne had been incredibly quiet for the last 5 minutes. The smug, predatory lawyer who had confidently marched into my daughter's hospital room was now sitting rigidly in her chair, staring at the red dossier, as if it were a live explosive. "You look pale, Vanessa," I said softly, folding my hands together on the table. "Are you starting to realize that sleeping with my husband was the worst career move you could have possibly made?" Vanessa forced a tight smile, trying desperately to maintain her professional composure. "I have no idea what you are talking about, Rachel," she replied, her voice completely devoid of its former arrogance. "I am simply acting as legal counsel for David during this divorce proceeding. I have absolutely nothing to do with Apex Holdings or their tax issues." I reached into my leather briefcase one more time. "I am not talking about their tax issues, Vanessa," I said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "I am talking about your personal involvement in commercial real estate fraud." I slid the manila envelope across the white tablecloth, stopping it right next to her expensive champagne flute. "Go ahead and open it," I offered. "I think you will find the contents incredibly familiar." Vanessa hesitated, her eyes darting toward David, who was currently staring at his lap in a state of absolute panic. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she opened the flap of the envelope and pulled out the documents. As she read the first page, the last remaining ounce of color drained from her face. What you are holding, Vanessa, is a copy of a formal complaint I filed with the State Bar Association an hour ago. I explained, my voice ringing clear and authoritative over the quiet jazz music. Attached to that complaint are copies of the commercial mortgage loan documents you personally facilitated this morning. The ones you processed to illegally leverage my $2 million home. You knew David did not have my consent. You knew the signature was forged. And as a licensed attorney, you stamped your notary seal on those fraudulent contracts anyway. You actively aided and abetted a massive financial crime right inside your new boyfriend's sister dining room. That is a lie, Vanessa stammered, dropping the papers onto the table as if they were burning her fingers. He told me he had a power of attorney. He told me you agreed to the loan to help his family. I tilted my head, feigning sympathy. And a high-priced corporate lawyer just took his word for it without verifying a single legal document. Please, Vanessa, do not insult my intelligence. You processed the loan because you are sleeping with him. You processed the loan because you thought you were going to share the profits once the retail plaza was renovated. You saw a vulnerable, greedy man, and you used your legal credentials to help him steal my money. I leaned forward, making sure she heard every single word of her impending doom. You committed federal wire fraud and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. You abused your position as an officer of the court to steal my property. The State Bar Association is going to strip you of your legal license by the end of the week. But disbarment is the absolute least of your problems, Vanessa. You are going to be indicted as a co-conspirator in a federal criminal enterprise. The evidence is undeniable and completely verified. Your signature is literally on the documents verifying the forged transaction. Vanessa stood up so fast her heavy wooden chair crashed backward onto the hardwood floor. The loud noise drew the attention of the entire restaurant, but she did not care. She was in full panic mode. I am leaving, she announced, her voice shrill and completely unhinged. She grabbed her expensive leather briefcase, ignoring David, who was reaching out to grab her arm. Do not touch me, David, she hissed, slapping his hand away. You told me she was stupid. You told me she was just a clueless corporate drone. You ruined my life. Vanessa turned around and practically sprinted toward the front of the restaurant, leaving her new boyfriend and his crying family behind. She pushed past the hostess stand and threw her weight against the heavy glass double doors leading out to the street. But the doors did not budge. She pushed again, frantically hitting the brass handles. Through the glass, I watched as two large black sport utility vehicles pulled up directly onto the curb, blocking the restaurant entrance entirely. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the dark street, casting eerie shadows across Vanessa's terrified face. Several men wearing dark tactical windbreakers stepped out of the vehicles and positioned themselves in front of the glass doors, physically blocking her exit. Vanessa backed away from the doors, her hands covering her mouth in sheer horror. She slowly turned around and looked across the crowded dining room right at me. I raised my glass of ice water and offered her a small, silent toast. The trap was fully closed and there was absolutely nowhere left to run. Her career and her freedom were officially over. Vanessa remained frozen against the glass doors, staring out at the flashing lights. Inside the restaurant, the thick tension at our table suddenly shifted. With Vanessa trapped and the reality of the federal raid settling in, David looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. He desperately needed a lifeline. He looked across the table at his brother-in-law. Jamal, do something, David pleaded, his voice cracking. You know people. You can call someone to fix this. Jamal did not look at David. He slowly reached into his dark jacket and pulled out a sleek black tablet. He placed it directly in the center of the white tablecloth, right on top of the fake divorce papers David had tried to force me to sign. I am not going to fix anything, David, Jamal said, his deep voice cutting through the panic. But I am going to finish what Rachel started. Jamal tapped the screen of the tablet. The volume was turned all the way up. Suddenly, The loud, clear sound of a man laughing echoed across the quiet dining room. Everyone at the surrounding tables turned to look. On the screen was high-definition security footage from the lobby of a luxury condominium. The timestamp in the corner flashed 1:45 in the afternoon. The video clearly showed David walking into the elevator with his arm wrapped tightly around Vanessa Thorne. David lunged forward to grab the tablet, but Jamal slammed his hand down hard on David's wrist, pinning it to the table. "Do not touch it," Jamal warned, his eyes blazing with a quiet fury. "You are done destroying evidence today." "You told the hospital you were home all day," Jamal stated loudly, ensuring every single person in our section heard him. "You told the social worker you were holding your daughter when she stopped breathing. But my home network and your own car telemetry say otherwise." Jamal swiped the screen, bringing up a digital map with a bright red line tracking a vehicle. "I pulled the GPS data from your luxury sports car, David. You left my house at 1:30. You drove straight to your mistress' apartment. You parked in her underground garage and stayed there for 2 hours. You were sleeping with that lawyer while your 6-year-old daughter was lying on the floor of your house, dying from the heavy sedatives you forced down her throat." Patricia gasped, pressing her hand over her mouth. Even she did not know the full extent of her son's depravity. She thought he had just left the child watching television while he ran out to do business. The realization that he had actively drugged Lily to commit fraud and then went to sleep with his mistress broke through her hardened, greedy shell. She stared at David as if she were looking at a complete stranger. David shrank back into his chair, his face completely devoid of blood. He had nothing left to say. His lies were completely dismantled by indisputable digital evidence. Naomi, who was still openly weeping over her frozen bank accounts, reached a trembling hand toward her husband. "Jamal." She sobbed, her makeup running down her face in dark streaks. "Please, Jamal. You have to help me. They are going to take everything. We are going to lose our home. You have to protect our family." Jamal slowly turned his head to look at the woman he had been married to for 7 years. He looked at her with an expression of absolute disgust. "I am protecting my family, Naomi," Jamal said, his voice cold and resolute. "That is exactly why I filed for divorce this morning." Naomi stopped crying for a fraction of a second, her brain unable to process this new catastrophic blow. What she whispered. "I know everything you did," Jamal continued, leaning back in his chair. "I heard you and Patricia laughing about how you were draining Rachel's bank accounts. I watched you sign those forged commercial loan documents in our dining room today. You thought I was just a quiet software engineer who would sit back and let you commit federal crimes? You thought I would let my children grow up in a house funded by stolen money and toxic lies?" Naomi shook her head frantically, reaching for him again. "No, Jamal, please. I did it for us. I did it for our future." "You did it because you are incredibly selfish and hopelessly greedy," Jamal corrected her, pulling his arm out of her reach. "There is no us anymore, Naomi. I packed my bags yesterday. I packed the kids' bags this afternoon. They are currently safe at my mother house, miles away from you and your criminal enterprise. And since you are about to be indicted on multiple federal charges of wire fraud and money laundering, my lawyer has already filed for emergency sole custody." Naomi let out a guttural scream of pure agony. It was the sound of a woman watching her entire universe collapse into ash. In the span of 20 minutes, she had lost her business, her stolen wealth, her freedom, her husband, and her children. She slumped forward onto the table, burying her face in her arms, completely broken. Jamal picked up his tablet and stood up from the table. He looked down at David and Patricia one last time. "Enjoy the dinner," he said quietly. "It is the last meal you will ever eat as free people." Jamal turned and walked away, leaving the three of them sitting in the wreckage of their own making. I watched him go, feeling a profound sense of respect for the man. He had surgically removed the cancer from his life. Now it was my turn to deliver the final blow to mine. I watched Jamal walk away, feeling a profound sense of deep respect. He had surgically removed the toxic elements from his life. Now it was my turn to finish mine. Before David could speak, the front entrance of the restaurant swung wide open. The tactical agents who had been blocking Vanessa stepped inside. 4 uniformed local police officers followed immediately. The sophisticated atmosphere instantly vanished, replaced by the heavy stomp of combat boots. A tall man in a gray suit walked at the front, holding official paperwork. He bypassed the terrified hostess and marched directly toward our table in the back alcove. The remaining diners fell completely silent, setting down their silverware to watch the spectacle unfold. David swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing nervously in his throat. He tried to stand up to project authority, but his legs visibly shook, causing him to awkwardly grip the edge of the table. "Excuse me," David sputtered, trying to sound indignant. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private family dinner." The man in the gray suit reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a gold badge, flipping it open. "I am Special Agent Miller with the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service," he announced, his voice projecting absolute authority. "I am accompanied by agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and local police. We are looking for Patricia Hayes, Naomi Hayes, and David Hayes." Patricia let out a high-pitched whimper, pressing her hands flat against the white tablecloth. Naomi was already a sobbing mess, incapable of responding. David raised his hands defensively. "There must be some kind of misunderstanding, Agent. We have not done anything wrong." Special Agent Miller stepped closer to the table, ignoring David's pathetic attempt at damage control. He placed the official paperwork right next to my red audit dossier. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Hayes," the agent stated firmly. "We are executing multiple federal arrest warrants tonight." David looked wildly at me, his eyes begging for me to intervene. "Tell them, Rachel," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Tell them this is just a domestic dispute." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded neatly on my lap. "I am not telling them anything, David," I replied, my voice as cold as ice. "Because unlike you, Special Agent Miller actually knows how to read a financial ledger." The agent nodded slightly in my direction. He turned back to David, his expression hardening into pure steel. "Your wife locking down her corporate and personal banking accounts early this morning is exactly what triggered our immediate jurisdiction, Mr. Hayes. When you attempted to force a $500,000 wire transfer across state lines from a frozen account, it generated an automatic priority alert in the federal banking security system." David's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with shock. He had no idea that his desperate scramble for cash had set off a massive digital alarm. That frozen wire transfer attempt gave us the exact legal authorization needed to trace the destination routing numbers. Special Agent Miller continued outlining the perfection of the trap. "Those numbers led us directly to Apex Holdings. Within hours, we received a verified corporate whistleblower dossier outlining 3 years of systematic tax evasion and money laundering connected to that exact shell company. Your mother and sister signed fraudulent tax returns to hide stolen capital. You attempted to execute interstate wire fraud to bail them out. You left a digital paper trail a mile wide." Patricia shook her head violently, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. "It was just a mistake," she cried out, her voice shrill and desperate. "We just needed a little more time." "You are out of time, Mrs. Hayes," the agent replied coldly. He picked up the first document from his stack. "Patricia Hayes and Naomi Hayes, you are both being placed under arrest for criminal tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit federal wire fraud." The agent then picked up the second document and looked directly into David's terrified eyes. "David Hayes, you are being placed under federal arrest for attempted wire fraud and conspiracy. Furthermore, local law enforcement is charging you with felony child endangerment and criminal negligence based on undeniable video and GPS evidence provided to the precinct an hour ago." The ultimate logic-based payoff had finally arrived. David believed his clumsy intimidation tactics could overpower the truth. He failed to realize that the justice system operates entirely on documented facts. My financial lockdown did not just protect my money, it provided the exact undeniable electronic proof the authorities needed to secure immediate federal warrants. "Turn around and place your hands behind your backs," Special Agent Miller commanded, gesturing to the uniformed police officers waiting behind him. The dinner is now officially over. The uniformed officers moved forward with synchronized precision. Two federal agents grabbed Naomi, who was too paralyzed by shock to even stand on her own. They hauled her out of her chair, her wrists clamped tightly in heavy steel handcuffs. Patricia tried to pull her arm away, swatting frantically at the female officer approaching her, but she was quickly overpowered. Her expensive new diamond necklace snagged on the officer uniform and snapped, sending tiny diamonds scattering across the hardwood floor like cheap glass. Patricia wailed loudly, screaming that she was a respected member of the community, but the agents completely ignored her protests. David, however, did not go quietly. As a local police officer reached for his shoulder, David panicked. He jerked his body backward, trying to escape, but there was absolutely nowhere to go. The officer grabbed him by the collar of his tailored jacket and slammed him face first right into the center of the dining table. The sudden impact shattered the crystal champagne flutes and sent the heavy silver ice buckets crashing to the floor. Ice cubes and vintage champagne soaked into his clothes and puddled around my red audit dossier. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs echoed loudly through the room as his arms were wrenched behind his back. "Get off me!" David screamed, his voice cracking in sheer terror. "I am a victim here. She is setting me up. You have the wrong person." The officer hauled David roughly back to his feet. His designer suit was completely ruined, covered in spilled alcohol and shattered glass. The arrogant venture capitalist who had mocked my career just 10 minutes ago was completely gone. In his place stood a pathetic, broken man trembling uncontrollably. The entire restaurant was completely silent except for the sound of crying. Every single patron in the wealthy establishment was standing up. Dozens of cell phones were raised in the air, recording every humiliating second of his downfall. The elite social circles he so desperately wanted to impress were now documenting his federal arrest for social media. He was going to be the lead story on the local news by morning. When David looked around and saw the glowing camera lenses, the final shred of his ego completely shattered. His knees buckled beneath him. The officer holding his arms tried to keep him upright, but David dropped heavily to his knees right beside my chair. He looked up at me, tears streaming rapidly down his red face. "Rachel, please," he begged, sobbing hysterically. "Please do not let them do this to me. I am so sorry. I was stupid. I was out of my mind. You have to tell them to stop. We are a family, Rachel. We have a daughter. You cannot let the mother of my child watch me go to prison." He was actually trying to use the daughter he poisoned as a shield to save himself. My expression did not change. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I looked down at the pathetic man kneeling in the spilled champagne and the puddle of his own making. "Do not ever speak about my daughter again," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register that silenced his sobbing. "You gave a 6-year-old child a lethal dose of narcotics so you could sneak off to a hotel room with your mistress. You left her alone to die while you tried to steal the house I bought. You lost the right to call yourself her father the second you crushed those pills." David let out a loud, pathetic wail, resting his forehead against the edge of the table. "I will give you whatever you want," he cried out. "I will sign the divorce papers right now. I will give you full custody. I will never bother you again. Just tell the federal agents you made a mistake on the audit. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I reached out and picked up my red dossier from the table, making sure it was completely dry. I placed it safely inside my leather briefcase and snapped the brass locks shut. "I do not make mistakes on my audits, David," I replied smoothly. "That is exactly why I am highly paid and you are unemployed. You spent the last 3 years complaining that I treated you like an employee rather than a husband. You resented my success. You called me cold and calculated because I focused on my career instead of validating your lazy delusions." I leaned down slightly, bringing my face closer to his so he could hear my final words over the ambient noise of the restaurant. "But my career is what kept a roof over your head," I whispered. "My career paid for your clothes, your cars, and your Mother Country Club fees. You thought you were outsmarting me today, but all you did was force me to do my job. You are absolutely nothing without me, David. And now you have the next 15 years in a federal prison cell to think about that fact. I stood up straight and looked at the police officer holding David. Take him out of my sight, I instructed. The officer yanked David to his feet. David kicked and screamed, crying my name over and over again as they dragged him away from the table. I watched as they hauled my husband, his mother, and his sister through the crowded dining room and out the front doors. The heavy glass doors shut behind them, cutting off their screams. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated their humiliating march into the back of the police vehicles. I stood alone at the ruined table surrounded by shattered crystal. I picked up my briefcase, taking a deep breath of the crisp restaurant air. The cancer was finally gone. 6 months have passed since that night at the restaurant. The crisp evening air I breathed outside the dining room was just the beginning of my new life. The legal aftermath was swift and entirely merciless. Federal cases move with terrifying efficiency when the paper trail is perfectly organized and handed directly to the investigators. David did not even try to take his case to trial. Without access to my bank accounts, he was forced to rely on an overworked public defender. When the federal prosecutors presented the high-definition lobby footage, the vehicle telemetry, the forged mortgage documents, and the fraudulent $3 million life insurance policy, his lawyer advised him to take an immediate plea deal. He pled guilty to attempted wire fraud and felony child endangerment. The federal judge showed absolutely zero leniency for a man who poisoned his own daughter for financial gain. David was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. I heard he tried to write me letters from his concrete cell begging for forgiveness. I never opened a single one. I simply threw them into the fireplace and watched them burn. Patricia and Naomi faced a similarly brutal reality. The Internal Revenue Service does not negotiate with arrogant tax evaders. The federal government officially seized their failing commercial retail plaza, their luxury vehicles, and their respective homes. Their remaining bank accounts were permanently liquidated to pay back the stolen funds and the massive federal fines. They were forced to declare total bankruptcy to avoid serving maximum prison sentences. Today, my former mother-in-law and sister-in-law are sharing a single cramped room in a rundown motel right off the interstate highway. Naomi works night shifts at a discount grocery store just to pay for their weekly motel rent, while Patricia sits on a stained mattress, complaining to anyone who will listen about how unfair the world is. The elite society friends they cared so much about completely abandoned them the moment the federal indictments went public. As for Vanessa Thorne, the State Bar Association revoked her legal license permanently. She is currently awaiting her own trial for conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Her brilliant corporate career ended before it ever really began, all because she decided to sleep with a lazy man and aid in stealing from a financial auditor. Out of the absolute wreckage of the Hayes family, Jamal emerged completely victorious. Because Naomi was a convicted federal felon, his divorce proceedings were incredibly fast. The family court judge granted him full legal and physical custody of his children without a single second thought. Jamal and I stayed close. He frequently brings his kids over to my house for weekend barbecues. He recently received a massive promotion at his software engineering firm, and watching him thrive as a single father has been wonderful. He protected my daughter, and I will always consider him my true family. Most importantly, Lily made a full and complete recovery. The pediatric doctors assured me there would be no long-term effects from the heavy sedatives. She is back at her private academy, excelling in her classes and laughing constantly. The dark shadow that David cast over our home has been entirely erased. I completely remodeled the home office and the master bedroom, removing every single trace of his existence. Our $2 million house is no longer a battleground of resentment and lies. It is a sanctuary of peace, love, and absolute security. My career is better than ever, but I make sure to log off at 5 o'clock every single day to spend the evening with my little girl. I no longer have to fund the luxurious delusions of parasites, which means Lily and I have everything we could ever want. The greatest lesson I learned from this entire nightmare is that blood does not automatically equal loyalty. Society places a massive amount of pressure on women to keep the peace, to endure toxic behavior, and to forgive the unforgivable just because it is family. But sometimes the only way to protect your peace and your children is to open the door and let the trash take itself out. You do not owe anyone your sanity or your hard-earned success. Have you ever had to completely cut ties with a toxic family member or partner to protect yourself? How did you find the strength to walk away when everyone expected you to stay and suffer in silence? I would love to hear your stories and experiences in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and justice. Share this video with anyone who might need a reminder that standing up for your own worth is the most powerful thing you can do. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Remember, your peace is your most valuable asset. Never let anyone steal it. Anyone. The harrowing story of Rachel and her manipulative husband David serves as a powerful testament to one undeniable truth. Financial independence and a commitment to objective reality are your greatest shields against emotional manipulation and betrayal. Society often pressures individuals, particularly working mothers, to endure toxic family dynamics for the sake of keeping the peace. David, Patricia, and Naomi weaponized Rachel's dedication to her career, attempting to gaslight her into believing she was a cold, negligent parent. They fully expected her to crumble under the emotional weight of their coordinated lies and the terrifying threat of losing her daughter to the state system. However, Rachel's ultimate salvation lay in her refusal to be blinded by the illusion of unconditional family loyalty. Instead, she leaned into her self-reliance and the cold, hard facts. By maintaining absolute control over her finances and trusting her sharp professional intellect, Rachel transformed herself from a targeted victim into an unstoppable force of justice. Her ability to instantly lock down her banking accounts prevented a catastrophic theft and forced her abusers into making desperate, easily trackable mistakes. The narrative brilliantly illustrates that when toxic individuals attempt to use our virtues, like our hard work, intelligence, and financial success, against us, those very virtues become the exact weapons we need to dismantle their deceit. Emotional manipulation completely loses its power when it is confronted with an irrefutable paper trail and unshakable self-worth. Ultimately, the core lesson is that we must never apologize for our success, nor should we ever relinquish control of our autonomy to appease insecure or greedy partners. We are our own best protectors, and the truth will always prevail when we have the courage to audit the lies around us. If you have ever had to rely on your own independence to break free from a toxic environment, please share your experience in the comments below and subscribe to join our empowered community.